America's first competition talk show.
You're in the hub. I don't like any of them on that side.
Why?
Oh, you want to know why?
Yeah.
Because they have absolutely no knowledge of what's going on. They're in dreamland. So is the Tea Party. They have absolutely no idea what's happening with them. It's unbelievable. Look at those people over there. They're so uneducated, they wouldn't figure out anything. If it wasn't for unions, we would be poor right now. The whole country is based on unions. That's why we make a living. We'd be just like any of these foreign countries without the unions to prop up the wages. Oh my God. And what do? They cut taxes for the billionaires, and then they blame it on the unions? Unbelievable.
I don't know what we're yelling about! Loud noises!
You have just experienced the prolonged effects of prolonged exposure to electric shock therapy or Rage Against the Machine or Jack Off Jill or some band like that. That guy, quite frankly, he's indicative of the reason we're talking about the topic of the SEIU and the union the unions coming out in mass against the really what I think is common sense legislation in Wisconsin right now. Now, this has been going on for about a week. And guys like that you just saw in the video are the kind of folks that have been running the show. I swear, if I worked for the SEIU with the protests that have been going on with the union thugs in Wisconsin the last week, I honestly, if I'm a rugby recruiter, I'm at home in that crowd. Les, you played rugby, man.
I did play rugby.
If you can't pull a championship rugby team out of that crowd,
you should be able to.
You really should.
Yeah, you should. Well, at least the scrubbers.
At least
the guys that are in the scrub that have to fight for the ball and make sure. At least those guys.
It's like a lover's quarrel.
Exactly. Yeah. The runners, maybe you go in the fringes of the group and.
Yeah. Well, there's potential there. That's the point. There's potential. There's great potential. All right. On the program all this week, I've got Les Atkins, who is a social media strategist on the Hub, and then Jeff, who is back. Jeff Martin, who's back again for more torture and torment, has been on the program before. He deals with financial investment, which means basically he never sleeps anymore in the world we live in today. but seriously, what's been going on in Madison, Wisconsin, the last couple of weeks is that Scott Walker, the newly elected Republican governor, was elected with well over 50% of the population, and basically. There's decades and decades of unionization and union history in Wisconsin. The people of Wisconsin said we've had enough. The state has a $3.5 billion budget hole. We've got to plug it somewhere. And so he came up with legislation which basically ends the ability of public sector employee unions to collectively bargain for their public sector pay. It does a number of other things. It actually requires that they pay up to 12%, I believe, of their health care costs, contribute partially to their pension plan, their 401k, on a much lower level than what you get in the private sector. And still, these guys are going ape. Guys, does this? I mean, at this point, could it possibly resonate with the American people any less?
You mean that they've got to be treated like everyone else?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
There's a disconnect.
I think that the public is really tired of our taxes paying those type of salaries. And even, I wish we could pay the teachers $200,000 a year, but at the same time, if our taxes are the ones paying their salaries, paying their pensions, paying their health care, then they shouldn't be upset about having to do just a little bit. Like everyone else has to do.
Yeah, just pitch in, Jeff.
Well, here these people have lavish contracts, okay? I believe in incentive-based performance. I want to see teachers doing a good job that are educating the students, and I want to see the results in the students that they're teaching, okay? Give them incentive and base it on performance. We have teachers going in here. They have these lavish contracts. They're not willing to give up any of their pension. Any of their benefits. They don't want to take any money off the table, and they're upset about it. Well, tough. Sorry about your luck.
And that's the thing. And when you look at the kind of folks that are coming out, these bought and paid for mobs, I mean, honestly, a big part of this is that a lot of these protesters are from outside the state. They don't represent the majority of Wisconsin, because the majority of Wisconsin voted for this man based on his campaign platform, which was all about reforming the union influence in the state. And it's kind of funny to hear them talking about now, because the folks in the Democrats who have literally run out of the state are saying really, really funny things that say they weren't paying attention.
They like
very
Elvis.
much.
They've left the building.
Well,
Exactly.
did you hear though? I actually heard this today, and I wish I'd have paid more attention. There's a group that immediately started recall
Yeah.
on all the Democrats that have left the state. They said they're not going to wait for the normal procedures. They've already started petitions to recall those elected officials that have basically fled the state.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that was in and I don't remember who said it, but it's a great line. It's like, do they not know what broke is?
Well,
exactly,
exactly. And Herman Cain was the one who actually said that.
Yeah,
at the
Herman
rally
Cain,
on
yeah,
Saturday.
exactly.
And the funny thing is, it's kind of like they're going to stay out of there either until Scott Walker comes to see their point of view, or I guess until their poker game gets to the point where they can be featured in an ESPN tournament. Because they've been gone that long.
Yeah.
And but do they really have any chips to play with here, Jeff?
Well, look, these people are upset, and it's tough. We're facing a $3.6 billion budget deficit in Wisconsin. People, you're going to have to give some concessions. That's what it boils down to. You've got to work together to make it happen. And I'm sorry they're upset, but hey, welcome to 2011. I mean, that's what's going on here.
Yeah, but isn't it more like, I mean, you've heard a lot about entitlements. Aren't they kind of basically saying
we've heard enough of those?
Yeah, exactly. But aren't they basically saying we're entitled? I mean, this is going to maybe stretching it way far, but aren't they just kind of doing what the welfare society has done, the same thing, although they don't get to sit at home?
No. When you get thrown into the mass of humanity called the union, then you're no longer that candy ass individual trying to take advantage.
Oh, okay.
Yes, then you're the nameless, faceless mass, which is kind of a good cover for doing these kind of things. You're no longer.
But the basis isn't one of the big things that they're trying to get rid of the collective negotiating rights.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what they're upset about. But what really are they upset about? I mean, you hear about they're upset about having to put money into their pensions or money into their health care. But the big argument seems to be, the contention seems to be the actual loss of the collective negotiation, which the state has said, Walker has said, that's what's causing them to basically go bankrupt.
Well, it's not a right.
No, it's not a right.
Yeah. It's not a right.
And that's the thing. They say, I mean, the Republicans, by the way, are getting more responses in Wisconsin, the ones in the legislature, supporting what they're trying to do with this legislation than the folks who are standing out on the front lawn. And that's really what I can only guess either that is because they do not understand the true vitriol and frustration that the people feel standing out in the halls, or that they just really don't resonate with Grateful Dead music done in a drum circle and in the rotunda. That could be it too. Maybe they just don't have good musical taste for the hippie crowd, and they need to change their tactics. The question here, though, to me is one side saying pass the bill, the other side saying kill the bill. Is this really even the place? Because now we've traced this to Organizing for America, to the current administration's organizing arm, and also to SEIU, and out-of-state unions flooding money, flooding people, flooding resources, bussing people in like they always do into Wisconsin. Is this really this seems to be about more than just pay at this point for unions? This is really shaping up to be the Republican form of government versus the Democratic form of government that for about 60, 70 years, everyone in government has been lying to the American people, saying that's what we are. And now we're seeing the two things come to a head. Les?
Yeah, well, you got to be careful.
Okay.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Because we're also, the Tea Party movement, they're bussing people in and they're putting money toward the opposition of this. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's, will it all take place in Wisconsin? But it also has already moved to Ohio. So, and Tennessee and also Indiana. So is this just the beginning? And, if they win, what occurs? You and I had a conversation. I mean, my wife is in a union because she works for an airline. Because she works for an airline, not I know.
Are you an infiltrator?
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
But she works for a union, but she's in an airline. And you and I talked about the difference between the
It's
unions.
a private company.
Exactly.
It's
It's a private
sector.
sector company, the difference between private sector and public sector.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that I think it's been too long where, a teacher can have tenure. Now, my mom is an educator, has always been an educator all life. If you have I agree with you, Jeff, if you have the incentive and then you get tenure, but it doesn't give you a blank check to stay there for as long as you want to stay.
Yeah.
Kind of like Congress.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, no, not like Congress, because there it is a blank check. By the way, I'm not a Tea Partier. I'm just a senator from.
No. I wasn't saying you were, but I'm saying we've got to be careful because you're really into the unions are sending people in too. But the Tea Party and Americans for Prosperity, they're sending in people as well.
Because
I think
those are
it's
the
like-
organizations
But-
that are
but-
not for
but-
entitlements.
I agree, and I'm not. I'm for them. I'm not
But
against.
my point is, if you bus in support from outside the state to intimidate and pass a bill, how is that called democracy? Because shouldn't the mob that rules be the one that is impacted by the law? Was I missing something? I know I'm missing something because that was a rhetorical question I teed up to disagree with myself. And
he scares me sometimes. He scares me.
I scare me too. I can't hardly sleep with myself at night. That's the point I wanted to make. And what point was that? That democracy is mob rule. The reason Thomas Jefferson got backhanded when he wanted us to get into the French Revolution was because the rest of the framers at that point understood what was going on with France was different than the revolution that we were having in the U.S. We set up a constitutional republic. They were fighting for democracy. What was the end result? Everybody got their heads chopped off. It's messy. It's just not as respectable. And ultimately, that's what I'm saying. We are a Republican form of government. This is a perfect, I think, example of what the difference looks like when you've got a minority mob intimidating to get their way, as opposed to the wishes of the majority who have duly elected their representatives, who are supposed to go in and support the will of the people. That's what makes us different. We don't have to get to this point, right?
Yeah, we've got to get away from the intimidation.
Yeah.
Have to.
Yeah.
Well, but the unions have a historical intimidation. It's kind of like they've called it. I heard a great line. They're calling this the Alamo, and whoever it was said that they've put them in the uncanny position where now they have to root for the Mexicans because they're calling this the Alamo, and it's if they win, what happens? And I've also heard, and please. Take this. It's kind of like what you said about the Republicans and the Democrats. Is this another case of Obama just basically helping out his buddies in the union? And this is kind of the start of it, and he kind of gets to stay out of it.
Yeah.
And sit in the background.
Yeah, but still bask in the glow. I don't know. I think it's a litmus test. If this falls, if Wisconsin were to, for some reason, fall to this kind of intimidation here, already we're seeing it in Ohio. We're seeing it in Indiana. The SEIU has a nationwide tour going on right now all over the country to hold these solidarity rallies that they're having. Really what they're trying to show is that the intimidation of the mob can overrule states' rights, can overrule the legitimate wishes of individual states, that an outside influence can come in and steamroll everything. That's the way I'm reading it. And but I got to read this because this was coming from Fitzgerald, the Republican, in the House there, who's running a lot of the show. I think he's in the Senate. He said what they're getting from individuals back home, meaning the legislators right now still stuck in the legislature, not enjoying themselves in a Chicago hotel. What they're getting from individuals back home is stick to your guns, don't let them get to you. Every senator he has spoken to today, he said, is getting that back home, which is awesome. It's great to hear from people who are part of a rally, but two people you meet at a fish fry or a person who comes up to you at a basketball game, those comments really sink in. So Did Fitzgerald just reveal his kryptonite? Union thugs should just go to more soul food events and they get further. Is that what we're saying? If they deep fry,
fish
you
fry.
should be there. That's where you're gonna win.
Well, you know,
Is it-
go ahead.
Go ahead.
They should have been going to the Capitol. They ought to be going to.
Well,
the
you know,
fish
one
fry.
of the things that also was in that same information was the lone person standing between the two crowds, saying that I'm praying for you. Can't we find some compromise together?
Didn't that
But
guy
I think,
say, wasn't that Rodney King? Can't we all just get along?
Can't we all
Once
just get
again,
along?
faith shows up in force in the
But-
public square.
But the interesting thing is, you know, it's like that's unfortunately we live in a republic that thinks it's a democracy and thinks that the loudest person wins the argument.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, our history, I believe, has shown that the person with the loudest voice in the public eye sometimes, unfortunately, wins the argument.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Exactly,
And I think and that really is the case. It's sad. It's a sad state
But
of affairs.
instead of scratching the surface, if you excavate and you find out the correct information, you know, then it may not necessarily be the loudest voice.
That means they would have to read.
Well,
that's right.
ultimately, here, just to get perspective and a counterbalance here. I mean, ultimately, people petitioning the government to pay itself out more than it's already paying itself, taking off work from their government job to petition for more government funding. I don't know what's wrong with that. I mean, you know, you can get one up on the private sector employees that have other obligations. They just can't be there. They have to show up on the weekend. And, you know, you take every advantage you can get. That's just capitalism, right?
No, what's wrong is you just said the government employees petitioning the government for more funding.
Okay, so it's a pass-through Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, I think the other people they said one of the things that why didn't they show up for the rallies?
Yeah,
they said the actual line was because we have to work for a living.
Yeah, that was a really good sign.
Yeah.
So I mean, ultimately, it's a republic, my man, and we're living in it at least for the time being. We'll see you tomorrow.
It's a republic if you can hold on to it, and we will.
We'll see you tomorrow.